Good morning to everyone. I'm called Johney Melpsa, and today I'll be talking about designing a qualitative research, a step-by-step guide. So I think qualitative research is not something new to any of us. At least most of us are familiar with the term qualitative research. So today I'll be talking about a step-by-step guide on how to conduct a qualitative research. So my presentation will follow this outline from introduction right down to references. And the goal for today is for us to actually understand what is qualitative research and actually also outline the steps that are involved in conducting a qualitative research by clearly identifying suitable research questions for the qualitative research and explain the process of conducting the qualitative research. So before we go ahead with the steps in qualitative research, we need to talk a little bit about what is qualitative research. And qualitative research is defined as a research technique that is used to gain an in-depth understanding of a particular topic. So qualitative research is a strategy that systematically collects organization and interpretation of phenomena that are difficult to measure quantitatively. So when we talk about qualitative research, we're talking about in-depth understanding, and it focuses mostly on social and cultural aspects and also psychological insight. It also focuses on exploratory approach. When we're talking about exploratory approach, we're talking about describing a phenomena rather than quantifying them. And in qualitative research, data we usually have here are text data, images, sounds, and more. So about the core aspects of qualitative research, it explores real-world problems by gathering perceptions and behaviors. And it also generates hypotheses and answers how and why questions. When we talk about generating hypotheses here, we are actually collecting data in order to know a particular thing, not that we are testing data like when we are carrying out a quantitative research. So qualitative research can be used as a standalone research, and can also be used with quantitative research, which we call the mixed method research. So some key characteristics about qualitative research are that, firstly, it has contextual depth. It focuses on understanding a phenomena within their environment. We'll understand that a little bit ahead. It has participants' perspective. So with qualitative research, you really get the perspective of a participant, since it emphasizes subjective experiences and meanings. It's a flexible kind of study design because in as much as you have a plan, you can always be flexible with your plan depending on what is happening in the field. And it's mostly non-numerical data that is collected, since we are talking about text, interviews, observations, and instead of statistical analysis. So before we go to the steps in conducting a qualitative research, I want us to understand the differences between the qualitative research and the quantitative research. So one of the differences is in terms of the goal. So with qualitative research, it builds an understanding of a phenomenon, human behaviors, cultural and social organization. While with quantitative research, it seeks explanations and at times causations. With the research question, most at times qualitative research answer questions of how and why. Meanwhile, with quantitative research, the aim is to be more conclusive and pertain to a large population, answering questions such as when, what, and where. With regards to the data, qualitative research may be comprised of words, behaviors, and images, while quantitative research can be manipulated numerically. We always have value when we talk about quantitative research. About informant selection, with qualitative research, participants are mostly selected using some sampling methods like progressive sampling methods, snowball sampling methods, and the participants are not always very, there are not always many of them. And the participants are hardly random, like depending on your research question, you want to select participants that are actually going to give you a solid understanding or a solid explanation of what you want. Meanwhile, with quantitative research, the aim is to ensure that the sample is a representative of the population from which it is drawn. Gold standard in a random sample. So here what I'm trying to say is that with quantitative research, you always want to have a sample that can be able to, so that you can be able to generalize with a particular population, because you will not, maybe you want to carry out the research if maybe your population is about 10,000 participants and you carry out a research that has just 10 people, a quantitative research that has 10 people, it's very difficult to actually generalize that research to the entire population. But with qualitative research, that's not actually, not that we don't think about it, but qualitative research, depending on where your saturation gets, that's when you stop with your sampling. So with regard to analysis, with qualitative research, it is more of an inductive process, while quantitative research is a deductive process. When we talk about inducive, it often relies on the categorization of data. So after collecting your data, you actually categorize your data depending on the things that come up, while with quantitative research, it has precise measurements, mathematical formulas, and also formulas to test hypotheses. With regards to the results, you understand the participants' perspective as embedded in their social context, while in quantitative research, goal is prediction, generalization, and causality. So this is actually the key aspect of our presentation today, which are the steps in conducting a qualitative research. The first step is for us to clearly define our research objective, followed by choosing a research design and also a qualitative research method. Also, identify the population and sampling strategy. We develop the data collection tool, followed by collecting the data and then analyzing data and ensure trustworthiness of your data, and you report your research findings. So we go straight to our first step is defining our research question. We always understand that the research question guides your entire study with clarity and focus. So if you miss out your research question, the probability of you missing out the entire study is actually very high. So when you want to carry out your qualitative research, you really have to take your time to be able to clearly define your research question. And for you to be able to define your research question, you first of all have to identify what problem you are about to solve. In order for you to identify this problem, it's always good to actually conduct a thorough literature search. This literature search will actually show you what has already been done and the gaps, because it's not so advisable to go around doing a research that many things have already been done on. It's like you're wasting resources. So going through literature, you can easily identify what has already been done and what needs to, maybe it has been done, but you also have to make further studies depending on different populations. So it's always important to clearly look at what has been done already. And you formulate a concise and specific question. So when we are talking about formulating our research question, we all know about the PICO framework, but today we are not going to talk about the PICO framework. We are going to talk about a different kind of framework that is also used in qualitative research. This is not the only framework, but it's also one framework that is highly used. We call the framework the SPIDER framework. So this SPIDER framework is also an acronym, and S here means the sample. The S here is actually the group of people that you're actually going to, for example, interview, or the group of people that are going to take part in your focus group discussion. PI here stands for phenomenon of interest. When we talk about phenomenon of interest, well, it focuses on the experiences, the behaviors, or the decisions being examined. Example here, our phenomenon maybe in the qualitative research can be participants' experience with self-screening for cervical cancer. That's actually what we are trying to explore in our research question. So the phenomenon of interest is actually participants' experience in self-screening for cervical cancer. So D here signifies the design. The design here is actually defined as a technique that is used to gather the qualitative data. So techniques used to collect data for qualitative research can be focused to interviews and observations. And EES stands for evaluation, which it is also similar to the PICO outcome. ARIA is a type of qualitative research. My presentation ahead will actually list out the different types of qualitative research. So some of the qualitative research here are the phenomenology, ethnography, grounded theory, and case study. But this spider framework can also be used in quantitative research. But the R here, I said area is a type of qualitative research because now we are talking about our qualitative research study. But area can just be the type of research. So it can either be a quantitative research or a qualitative research. For the purpose of representation, the area stands for the type of qualitative research we are about to conduct. So an example here is of a qualitative research question is, for first-time mothers, does antenatal education positively affect their delivery experience? So here, our sample here is first-time mothers, and the phenomenon of interest is antenatal education. Our evaluation here is positively affect delivery experience. So our evaluation, we're trying to evaluate if antenatal education positively affects delivery experience. And the design here is actually an interview. It's actually an interview, a survey that is given to first-time mothers, and the research here is a case study. So maybe they will have to maybe take one person, like just one first-time mother, and interview her on how her experience with antenatal education affected delivery. So before the next step, step 2 for conducting a qualitative research is choosing the appropriate research design and method. So there are various types of research design. So I structured it into research designs and research methods. So there are various types of research design, and the first we are going to be talking about is ethnography. This is a design, this design explores cultures, social groups, and study people in their natural environment. So this type of research is a kind of research that the investigator or the researcher most of the time blends within the context of like the environment. For example, you want to carry out the research in the north to know maybe a particular tradition that maybe they are experiencing, or a cultural event or something. So the researcher will go and become maybe part of them, maybe willingly participating in some of their activities so that he can better write, or maybe just observe from afar. Then what is known about this type of qualitative research is that the researcher explores their culture and the social group, and the researcher is actually involved within the environment where the study is taking place. The next point is grounded theory. Grounded theory is a type of qualitative research that analyzes data to develop theories that are grounded in data collected rather than starting with preconceived hypotheses. So what is peculiar about grounded theory is that you use this kind of qualitative research when you maybe don't even have an idea on what to expect. Most of the time it's done when we have no information about a certain research question. So we have to start asking questions before the answers are actually going to reorient us. So this method is always good to be used when maybe you don't really have enough information about a particular research topic. The next studies design is phenomenology. I think this is what is widely used because this kind of research, qualitative research, is there to explore the understanding of individuals' experiences, their perspectives, their beliefs. You see questions like like the question I first of all spoke about first-time mothers and antenatal education, like their experiences. This is a phenomenology kind of study because it's exploring patients' experiences, their perspectives, and their beliefs. And such studies are actually carried out using methods like interviews, focus groups, and observations. The fourth type of research design is a case study. The case study here, it's actually for maybe a specific individual. For a specific group, it's usually a very small group, or for an event. This case study focus on in-depth analysis of single cases or small number of cases to gain insight into complex phenomena. The last we are going to be talking about today type of design is the narrative inquiry. Narrative inquiry is a qualitative research approach that aims to understand and interpret individuals' experiences through the lens of storytelling. So I think this one is direct to the point. It's just someone maybe narrating a story. And with this type of qualitative research design, you actually need to get somebody that really knows so much about the story. So this is why in qualitative research, there's always like purposive sampling because you want to give enough information. So you also go to the person that has the information you need. When it comes to the qualitative research methods, they are subdivided into two. We have a researcher-generated qualitative research method, and we have a naturally occurring qualitative research method. Here, when we say researcher generated, we are just trying to say that it's the researcher that actually brings out, that collects the data. While naturally occurring is actually data that is already found somewhere and the researcher just goes and collects and just copy maybe what is already existing. So some of those research generated data collection methods are the interviews, focus group discussion, and observation. Because this presentation is going to be done next week, I will not explain so much about these various types of methods. So in order to select the appropriate method for the study design, like we always say, you have to have a clearly defined research objective because this research objective is going to help you to choose the appropriate study design and the methods that you'll be using for your qualitative research study. You have to clearly define your research context. When we are talking about clearly defining your research context, we are talking about also the research question, because if you are to carry out a study that is a little bit sensitive, especially maybe about, for example, STIs in adolescents. You know that adolescents maybe that are, for example, sexually active, they will not be so willing to maybe talk about some things in the presence of adults or in the presence of some kind of people. So in those kind of studies, you might really want to take them away from some kind of people, or you might really want to maybe conduct an interview, a one-on-one interview, because not everybody is so open to talk about their sexuality in front of a group of people. So when you're choosing a research method or a research design, you always have to take note about the context of the research. Determine also the type of data you will need, especially if you want to the way you want to present your result. You need to understand the type of data you want before you start your study. Review existing literature. Here, reviewing your existing literature also serves as a guide because you might be carrying out a study and you don't have so much information about it, but you look at the paper and that paper gives you a clear methodology on how to go about things. So always reviewing literature to see what others have done is always very helpful. Our next step is actually identifying the population and sampling strategy. Like I earlier said, the population here, you don't just take everybody. You define a target population based on your research topic. With regards to sampling in qualitative research, we have some sampling methods that we always use. We have purposeful sampling, which is choose information-rich cases. When you are talking about information-rich cases here, you're talking about choosing people that actually gives you enough information about a certain topic. Snowball sampling here refers to referrals from contacts. Like, for example, maybe somebody has reoriented you about maybe someone that has more information about something. This is what we call snowball sampling. And theoretical sampling. At times, you start conducting your qualitative research and you realize that maybe you're not getting enough information and you have to actually readjust the people that you're collecting the information from. And this actually helps you reorient you to the right source where you get the best information from. And with sampling size in qualitative research, there's no sample size calculation. You know that you have reached your sample size when you have attained saturation. Saturation in qualitative research is defined as a point where adding other participants do not add any new knowledge or information to what you already have. Step 4 in developing a qualitative research study is develop your data collection tool. The data collection tool in qualitative research is very flexible because based on what you already have in the field, you can always be so flexible to change your question or to reorient your question in such a way that is going to help you answer your qualitative research question. So when you're choosing you choose your instrument depending on what kind of method you're using. Either you're doing an interview or you're doing a focus group discussion. So if you're doing an interview, you need an interview guide. And a focus group discussion, you need a focus group discussion guide and a document review guide. So for your questions, in a qualitative research, your questions are mostly open-ended. And the questions always have a probability of probing. You need, in order to carry out this kind of exercise in qualitative research, you need to know exactly how to probe, and you need to know how to interview in such a way that it is very natural. It's very natural. It's more about a conversation you're having with somebody rather than you strictly interviewing the person. So before actually going in to collect your data, you need to make sure you actually master your interview guide very well. And you should be very flexible in how you are probing the question. When you're done organizing or developing your data collection tool, you have to pilot test the tool to make sure that it actually answers what you have or make people understand the question. At times you develop your tool and you think maybe people understand the question, but you go to the site and you discover that you're asking the questions and many people don't understand what you really want. So you have to actually prepare yourself very well and pre-test it so that you know exactly what people want. So the 5th step is the data collection process. Qualitative research is just like quantitative research. You always need an ethical clearance because some people think, oh, I'm just interviewing people. It's not really important, but qualitative research is also research. So you have to get an interview guide in order to begin any data collection for qualitative research. You identify and enroll participants to your study, and you always ask for their consent. If you're actually carrying out an interview or a focus group discussions and you need to record these participants, you also have to clearly ask their permission before being recorded. So while using your guide, you should be flexible. And like I said, you should allow the conversation to flow naturally. Make sure the session is recorded with their permission like I said, and manage and organize your data very well. Transcribe interview verbatim as soon as possible. When you're carrying out your qualitative research interview, it's always advisable that when you're done doing it within the space of 24 hours, you transcribe the transcript. You transcribe the audio so that it's easy for you to remember, especially if it's not really clear to remember what the participants said, rather than coming maybe after 1 month before transcribing what your audios. And make sure that whenever you transcribe your audios, you give each audio a code. It should be anonymous, like someone should not just see the transcripts and know exactly who said it. So you should always make your transcripts to be anonymous. Our sixth step is analyze your data and ensure trustworthiness. So with qualitative research, there are several types of ways to analyze the data. We have the thematic analysis, the content analysis, and constant comparison. I think we will have another presentation that will throw more light to this. When you're also analyzing your data, before analyzing your data, you should make sure your data is trustworthy. When we are talking about trustworthiness, it's about ensuring that the research is believable, relevant, consistent, and free from research bias. So when we are talking about credibility, it refers to the extent to which the finding accurately reflects the participant's perspective and experiences. So here we mostly do things what we call triangulation, using multiple sources to ensure that what you have is actually the right information. And when we are talking about dependability, is the extent to which the finding you can be applied to similar contexts and you're still going to have the same information. And transferability refers to the consistency of the finding if the study were repeated under similar conditions. And when we talk about confirmability, it refers to the extent to which the findings are free from research bias and are based on the data, not the researcher's personal belief or expectation. So your qualitative research study, you have to make sure that it's actually trustworthy, like it's credible, it's transferable, it's dependable, and it's confirmable. So in order to verify your data or your data analysis, you have to use triangulation. Using triangulation and member checking, like we said, you use other tools or other resources to make sure that what you have collected is not based on your own perspective or your own beliefs. Our last step in conducting a qualitative research is actually reporting your findings. Like in all research, we have to report your findings. You communicate your findings clearly and you discuss the meaning of your findings, comparing it to other things in literature, and you disseminate your results maybe by publishing it in an article or sharing it in a conference. So in conclusion, a qualitative research is a strategy for systematically collecting data, organizing and interpreting phenomena that are difficult to measure quantitatively. It can be used as a standalone research, or it can also be used with quantitative research in a mixed method study. And lastly, having a well-formulated research question will guide you throughout your qualitative research. So it's very important that you clearly define your qualitative research question using maybe the SPIDER framework that we just presented, or maybe any other framework that has been clearly designed. So these were the references for today's presentation. Thank you.